In this video, I'm gonna show you how to put your cannabis grow on autopilot. We'll cover everything from watering systems to nutrients and feeding, so you can go away and come back to healthy, thriving plants. All right, but before we do, today's video is brought to you by Real Growers Grow Dots, the easiest way to feed your high-value plants. You mix Grow Dots in once at the beginning of your grow, and they feed your plants all the way to harvest. You don't have to worry about nutrient burn or nutrient lockout. Grow Dots does all the hard work for you. Check them out over at realgrowers.com. And while you're there, use coupon code Scotty420 to get 20% off your first order. Now let's get back to the show. Come on, High C, let's do it.
All right, man. So this is kind of your ethos when I first came into your world.
Yeah.
I know a lot of cannabis growers want to make things super complicated and treat it like a science experiment. Your philosophy is kind of the opposite.
Yeah, I want to let the plants do the work. Okay, there's a guy, Gabe Brown. He's an organic gardener, and he goes, if you're doing this right, you got to get lazier. You let the plants grow themselves. You set them up, man. Yeah, so I am the kind of guy that might not show up in my garden for a day or two, and it's nice to know that everything's cool.
Right, and you said... I feel kind of privileged because usually when we leave town for a couple of days, it's like a vacation or a work vacation.
Yeah.
But there's maybe a family emergency. Maybe you have to put in some overtime. I know a lot of growers that won't even go on vacation because they don't want to leave their grow for a couple of days.
Yeah, I mean, God forbid you're sick. I was sick for a couple of days. I didn't feel like getting up and watering. Perfect example. I didn't feel like getting up and mixing nutrients, standing over with the watering can. I was just too sick.
So let's talk about if something happens,
Sure.
how to have your grow on autopilot so you don't have to worry about it.
No problem, man. And it's gotten easier. I think I've been growing for, almost 30 years, somewhere around there. And in the beginning, there wasn't a lot of tech, so you really had to work it out yourselves. Now they've made it really easy.
So let's start with the first thing that I think most growers can screw up the easiest, especially if they have to ignore their grow for a couple of days, and that's watering.
Absolutely. So I think the simplest watering is getting a watering can and hand watering. I definitely said to nice guy Kenny, hey, just come on over and hand water these things. But it is a pain in the butt. They got to show up. My friends have been like, yeah, I showed up yesterday. But you think about it, if you don't water, the plants can get really stressed, and you might be able to get them back. You'd be surprised what these plants will come back from. But man, nothing will damage them. I don't say nothing. It will damage them really badly. So consistent watering, not letting them dry out, and then not letting them get too wet is a big deal.
That's the one I'm more worried about, is them being like, I couldn't tell if it was enough, so I kept pouring water. So what do we do instead?
Good instructions when I'm giving my friend instructions. Hey, lift up the container, stick your finger in there, but lift up the container. Is it a little bit light? Is it completely saturated and heavy? But for me, it's easy. I use a light enough soil mix, like I'm using cocoa. And then back in the day, I just used to use drippers. You can set up a dripper system. I'm sure you can find on the internet how to do it. I mean, a pump's $20 probably. The tubing is maybe $10. I mean, for 34, you need a timer. So for about $50, if you're top watering, you could set up a dripper system. Really easy. It'd be reliable, and you could figure it out. That'd be a good babysitter for you.
That is one way. I like what you've come up with even better, though. And this was kind of new, foreign to me, self-irrigating planter systems.
SIP buckets. I learned this. There was a guy, Hempy, and I don't know if that's his real name, but he was making these buckets where he'd put 2 inches of perlite on the bottom, a little hole for the excess water to come out, and then cocoa coir on top. And that was the first time I ever saw a sub-irrigated planter. Below, the water is below. You're using a media that wicks it up, and if you build that media correctly, it holds the right amount of air and moisture, air and water.
And then you came up with the real buckets. Shameless plug for Real Growers.
Yeah, I got lazier. I was like, dude, you have to fill the reservoir? I don't want to do that, man. So yeah, I have the real buckets. You can put a reservoir on top. You can just load it up. I have mine hooked up to a water line, so I cannot show up for a week. But yeah, the sub-irrigated planters were definitely a game changer.
And they keep the plant with the exact amount of moisture.
Yep.
And with the real buckets, they can go for like 4 or 5 days without having to check the water.
Yes, that's it. Yeah, it depends on your temperature and humidity. You know, you got a few gallons worth of reservoir there. Yeah, you can put a bigger reservoir on there. You can put a water line to it. There's all sorts of stuff, depending on how long you're going to be out of town.
All right, cool. Let's talk about the next part of your grow that you can automate.
Yeah, man. Environment is key. And it's something, if you set it up right, then you shouldn't need your plant babysitter, your plant sitter shouldn't need to do too much with it.
And I think about environment, there's a lot that can go wrong. And I'm thinking just like 20 years ago, 10 years ago,
right?
There was no way that I would ever imagine setting my environment on autopilot.
No, oh my gosh, it's so crazy you say that. That was the brand of environmental control 20 years ago. They were $1,000 and it was AutoPilot environmental controls. And it would have a sensor for turning your exhaust fan on at certain times. And it was very complicated. There was tons of plugs and all that stuff. And dude, it got really easy as, technology has evolved. I'm sitting about 5 feet from an AC Infinity tent, and it's got a little controller on there. And the controller is, I think it's a 69 controller, controls temperature and humidity, meaning it's just got switches. It's like a high, when the temperature gets too high, senses it, turns on a vent fan for you. When it gets to the ideal humidity, turns off the vent fan. So just simple environmental controllers like that, and they're not expensive. Oh, it's made life so much easier.
And I know this is kind of like a no-brainer. Everybody knows this one, but having a timer for your light or having a light that has a built-in timer was also a game changer for me.
Yes, no built-in timers, man. I have a built-in timer on a light and it broke.
Oh, no.
Yeah, always. Yeah, because there's definitely, you want to get a heavy-duty timer, too. If you're going to get a timer for your water, that's different than the timer for your lights. Look, it'll say heavy-duty or something. Yeah, putting things on a timer. I guess back in the day, before environmental controls, I would just exhaust my room every 2 hours on a timer because I didn't have that luxury.
Okay, so we got our watering taken care of. We got our lights. We've got our environment taken care of.
Yes.
Next thing that we can automate in our grow.
Hey, one last thing about the lights and the timer. I've definitely had them mess up before. I've had somebody bump into it before. I've had the tabs pull halfway out. And I've had the timer actually just burn out and stop working. One of the best insurance policies I have, I don't know if it's an insurance policy, just something that lets me sleep at night. You can buy these little webcams for, I don't know, $50, $70. They just go right into your internet, into your internet system. And man, you can just pop on there. Let me go take a look, make sure the light is on. Our buddy from Pulse was telling us that the biggest warning that they get, the biggest notification they get about something's wrong in your grow is a light malfunction.
So you can just pop on an app on your phone and you can see if your lights are working.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy. They also have cool sensors like that Pulse sensor, which is neat. But yeah, a little webcam, man. I don't know how cheap they've gotten.
Okay, so we've covered watering.
Yep.
We've covered environment. We've covered lighting.
Yeah.
3 things to automate in your grow. I know we got one more thing that we can set on autopilot in our grow. This is also a pretty important one.
Oh, nutrients, man.
Okay.
Yeah.
So again, a couple of years back, I never would have dreamed of automating my nutrients unless it was maybe, I don't even know if I could mix them into a reservoir and trust it to be automated.
You know what I would do? I would mix a reservoir, and the reservoirs aren't huge. A lot of times your reservoir will need to be filled up 2 or 3 times. And then I would put like a garbage can. I'd go get one of those big Rubbermaid garbage cans. I think they've got like 42-gallon ones. They've got 30-gallon ones. I'd fill that up with my extra nutrient solution. And then I would just take a pump and I would just put it on a timer for 2 minutes a day. It would pump some water into the main reservoir, or you could use floats or whatever. But I would go through that extra. I would set up an extra reservoir, basically, just to make sure. Because, man, there's nothing worse than somebody forgetting or not watering your plants for you.
And not feeding them while they're watering them.
Yeah, the food and the water, yeah. Okay,
so my concern would be if I had to leave town for a couple of days and I did that method, would the nutrients 2 days later still be good?
You'd have to mix them. Either you're given real specific instructions to your friends to mix the nutrients, and it's really hard. I mean, think about it. If I'm like, I use silica, make sure the silica goes in first, and then add the micro, and then stir that in, wait, then add your grow and your bloom, and then start adjusting your pH.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? A little too much, man.
Well, if it still requires a human to come do it, that's not automated.
You're right. Okay. You're right. Yeah.
But we do have an automated nutrient now.
I told you, I don't stress over my stuff, man. I'm a commercial grower. I grow tens of thousands of bamboo plants in Florida, and I haven't been to Florida for 3 years, man.
Okay, so
having a system, could you imagine if I had to walk around and have my guys walk around and manually grow every one of those tens of thousands of plants?
Manually feed every single one of them?
Just in general, man, all that stuff. I got to manually water it. So yes, having a system of automation is how ag is done. So taking those, and by the way, there's great, amazing tools out there. There's great techniques. So taking those techniques and bringing them into our small indoor agriculture is certainly fitting, and they work great.
So let's specifically talk about nutrients now. How did you figure out how to automate nutrients and explain how, to me, this is like the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, I mean, most nutrients, the way they're done, they're delivered in liquid. A little bit of them are delivered each time that the plant drinks. That's really difficult to nail for 100 days straight, especially if you're going to be out of town. I use a controlled release fertilizer. I developed these grow dots specifically for this reason, because of my personality, I'll say. And the idea is they're moisture released. I designed them so that they release the right amount of nutrient at the right time. And then as long as they're getting wet, as long as there's moisture around them, the osmotic pressure will release the right amount of nutrient at the right time. So nothing worse than going away on business, I should say, right? Working hard and getting back and seeing your plants all dead, and then your wife going, "Did I do a good job?" So, yeah, I've done everything over the past 30 years to try to avoid that. I've had some heartbreaks in my time.
Well, I know when I first started working with you was when you were still testing out the grow dots.
Yeah.
And you were like, "No, we've got this great technology. It's time release nutrients."
Yeah.
And I was like, "This sounds too good to be true," but they mix them in right at the beginning, right when I plant them in my final container.
Yeah.
And they feed them the right nutrients all the way up to harvest.
We're still stuck from the hydroponics days in the 80s and 90s. That's the technology we're using. That's the mindset we have with deep water culture, inert media, rock wools, watering a little bit every time, cyclical irrigation. All that stuff was when you're growing in 6-inch rock wool cubes or you're growing in a complete inert media. They don't really apply to what we're doing now, where we're putting organic components in there, lots of humates, humic acids, and just a different type of environment, different soil, different philosophy than what we were doing 20, 25 years ago.
But it does make it to where if you've got to leave town for a couple of days, the old deep water culture, you'd come back and everything would be dead. And now you come back and everything's still thriving.
No, you got a 50-50 chance of deep water culture. You say a little prayer before you go in the grow. Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of pumps and sprayers and things to get clogged, things to fail. Man, I have a passive system. The only thing I have to worry about is a float valve getting clogged, and there's only plain water going through it. So float valves don't clog with plain water. But that's just me. I love making growing as easy as possible. But what about you? What is one thing that you have automated in your grow? Let me know in the comments. And if you dug this video, please hit that like button, smash that subscribe button, share this video with another grower you know, and check out the other couple videos YouTube's recommending. I think you'll dig them.